All right, hello. Hello, everyone. Hello. All right, thank you for being here today. We're going to hear and listen to Robert Glew. I want you to welcome him, please. Okay, Robert's going to talk about some time spent in Africa, among many other things and topics. So please give him your attention, and thank you again for being here as well. All right, here we go, Robert.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm a very shy person. All of you know me. This is actually the 50th anniversary of the first trip my wife and I made to Nigeria. I'm speaking like a Nigerian. And my wife is here with me. She's in the back row over there. She's a lot more outgoing than I am. So I might refer to her every so often. So I just took a few notes down just to get going because I'm so nervous speaking in front of a group. So why do you think God made Africa? I don't expect the answers, but I'll answer it. So I think God did it to show that not all of the world is a shopping mall. That's one. And to show them that there are parts of the world that are not reachable by Amazon/FedEx. So anyway, hope I don't offend anyone. That would really upset me. Why would someone go to Nigeria? Most people, I'm called a European because my wife is, because we're white. But most people would say, you went to Nigeria more than once. And I said, yes. Why is that remarkable? And they said, I went once and I would never go back. And I heard that over and over again many times. So it is a difficult place. But my wife and I liked it so much that I probably spent more time on projects and work and teaching and research in Africa in general than I did here with my tenure track jobs. So I started actually way back at Pitt when I was just 26 or 27 and didn't know anything. Some people would say I still haven't learned very much. So I spent a lot of those years in Nigeria, and then I moved to the Southwest. And some of you know I became a chairperson. I hate administration. It lasted 7 years. It was a penance for what I don't know, because I lead such a careful life. But anyway, in New Mexico, I continued it, which was difficult because the dean said, we hired you, this is the Southwest. Perhaps you haven't noticed. And my wife and I had gone to the length of learning to speak Spanish. So she's a French speaker, and she taught me French. And if you're going to work in West Africa, it really helps. In fact, it's essential. If you want to integrate and move around, you have to be able to speak French. And so he said, you know, you're in a Spanish-speaking area. We've got Mexico and all these countries in Central America and South America. And so I said, well, I've got Spanish now, so would give it a try. And I didn't like it. There's nothing wrong with it, it just didn't fit me. And so I told him that I was going back to Africa, and he said, well, you know, we're not happy with that. And I said, well, I've got something called tenure. You know, you got to keep me on. So I stayed for 35 years. And during that time, I went to Africa. So why else might you go to this place? Well, they had a civil war, and it was just ending. And the federal side, where it's mostly Muslim, the larger population there is Muslim, and the main tribe of the Muslim area is Hausa. And then the western part of the country, as I'll show, is called Yoruba. The people, the main tribe are Yoruba. They're not Yoruba, they're Yoruba. And then in the east, there are the Ibu. The east and the west are separated by a very major river. There's the Amazon, there's not the Amazon, there's the Niger, and there's the Nile, and then there's the Niger, which cuts down through most of West Africa. And then the Congo, of course. So that was one. Number two was that my wife and I had healthy kids until we had the third one. The third one was born, lovely, beautiful child with severe mental retardation, and he had Down syndrome. And when he died, it was right around this time. And I had a sabbatical coming. You know, after you've been in a place for so many years, you can have a sabbatical and go away for a year. And so I thought, well, they had the civil war in Nigeria, 3 million people were killed. They burned down most of one part of the country and destroyed the medical school. So they built a new medical school. But a lot of the teachers had fought in the war and were killed. Or they just ran away to Europe, Germany, England, France, places like that. So they needed teachers. And so I read an article in the New York Times which described this condition, and I said, you know, the stars are aligning, and, you know, for a variety of reasons, having watched my wife work so hard to take care of our son, and losing him at that time, I suggested we go and we help set up a curriculum at the new medical school. I had been to Canada maybe once or twice, but I had never been out of the Boston area. And so I didn't know anything about other countries. And so I said, well, we're going to go to West Africa. And so she thought that would be good. We had 12 and 13-year-old sons. We still have them. And they thought this was dilly-dilly, that this would be great. We're going to go to Africa. You know, their view of Africa was sort of from Tarzan movies. We're all old enough to know those racist kinds of movies. But anyway, so we packed up, and I had a sabbatical, so I went there. So I want to show you what the place looks like. So this is one of the soldiers from the federal side. But most of the people I'm going to show you are actually my friends. I taught them, or I taught their children, their spouses, or whatever. So I ended up making maybe 25 or 30 trips to this place. So I went back. And that was the key. I was able to integrate pretty well into the culture wherever I went. I ended up having lived in and worked in and taught in more parts of the country than any of my fellow professors, because they couldn't travel out. There was always so much conflict. If you came from tribe A and you're going into the area where tribe B is dominant, you could really get into a bad situation quickly. But I could move between all the areas. I could move around in West Africa. I could shoot up from Nigeria into Niger. I've done research in Burkina Faso, which most of you probably never heard about. Cameroon, all these places I had free movement. And if you can speak the language of that area, West Africa is actually mostly French speaking. Then you have a really easy time of it. So this is Nigeria. Let me move over here. So I hope you can hear me in the back. Can you hear me in the back? So this is the main piece of geography. This is the Niger River. It flows out of Timbuktu. Right over here is Timbuktu. It's not on the map.
There's a place?
Pardon me?
There's a place?
It's a place. Yeah, it's really a place. Yeah. So all these countries that surround Nigeria, by the way, most Africans live in Nigeria, has 300 million. It's almost population-wise the size of the United States. So a lot of people. So I hope you like black people. If you go to Nigeria, that's what you're going to get. That's what these Africans are. But having spent 15 years, 20 years in Pittsburgh with all of its ethnic groups, and I spent a lot of time in the 5 black boroughs of the city, I was quite comfortable. I was quite comfortable on the Hill district, where they actually gave me money to support the programs I'm going to show you. So Willie Stargell was there then. We all remember Willie Stargell. And every time he hit a home run, they'd say, what did they say when he hit a home run?
Chicken on the hill.
Yeah, lay some chicken on the hill. So I didn't go there, but I did go to the churches. They were incredibly generous in helping here. So you can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the main, all of this over here, you can't see from where you are, but this is all Muslim. It's supposed to be a joke. This is all Muslim over here. This is Ibu down here. This is where the secessionist group was. All the oil was down here, but the Ibus had no power. They couldn't spend the money. All the money ended up over here in the Yoruba side, and with the federal side, which was up here in this area. So they had a civil war. They wanted to get some of their own oil revenue so they could develop their own part of the country. So they fought for 4 years, 2 to 3 million people, mostly, like in all wars, like in Gaza or wherever you're looking, are civilians. So the medical school that was destroyed was right in this area here. It's all rainforest. This is all rainforest. This is all desert. It's Sahara from here up. And then there's the central area, which is savanna. We all know what savanna is. It's a grassy area. This was 7,000 feet high. So it was a mountainous savanna. And so I taught down here. I did research up here. And I was also in a place called Sokoto, which is famous historically. So that's Nigeria. All around here, Cameroon, Chad, Niger. One of our sons liked it so much here that he went in the Peace Corps. He got a PhD in anthropology, African anthropology. And he went back and he still travels to East Africa, namely Tanzania, to do work in the northern area there. So he's been going back and forth almost as often as I traveled to West Africa.
Where is Qatar?
Pardon me?
Where is Qatar?
Where is Qatar?
Oh, Qatar is in the Middle East. That's on the, this is the African continent. Qatar is over near Saudi Arabia, the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz. I call it the Strait of Hormuz. It's the Strait of Hormuz. We have a munching moose right here in town. That's where I must have picked that up. But anyway, so there's usually 2 out of 3 years. There's really very bad drought, and with it comes famine in West Africa, all across that Sahelian region. And so these are people coming out of Niger into Nigeria, where there's more water and there's more grass, and where they can raise their animals. They can sustain them during the drought. And then they go back. So these are Zarma or Jama people. So these are my friends. I worked mostly in the north. All of my teaching and research was done in the northern area. The southern area is dominated by Yoruba, and by the Igbo are Christian areas. Catholic, about half Catholic and about half Protestant. But in the north, it is 98% Muslim. I found it really a very nice environment in which to work. So this is Saleh. This is his son down here. I don't know if you can see him poking his head. So Saleh is probably one of my very closest friends there. He's the first one I ever met. And he comes from a group called I'll get it. But anyway, so he's a cattle herdsman, Fulani, the Fulani. And I spent almost all my time with this particular ethnic group. So I know more about that ethnic group than I think anybody who's ever been in West Africa, because I wrote papers about them, because I studied everybody, whether they're women, pregnant, whether they're children, whether they're famished. I studied everything that moved, including the cattle. So I know a lot about the health of cattle. The cattle, they sell for about $300 US. The goats are about 70 bucks. So the Fulani live off of these animals. So that's the economy is based on that. So they sell a lot of yogurt and milk and cheese, and they can ferment anything into anything. And I collected everything they put in their mouths. Everything they ate became something that I could study. So when I was at Pitt, I would take a dozen Pitt medical students over for 10 weeks. It's a long time, and they would all have a research project. I always had them work in pairs, because if one went down, the project kept going. And people go down. If you spend any time there, you will get infection. There are things you cannot get antibodies for. You cannot get immunization for any of that. So you just have to expect you're going to be sick most of the time. Malaria, cholera, I've had all those, and a whole bunch of other things. It's just the price of being there. So these are his brothers. In Islam, you can have 4 wives. I can't imagine why you'd want to do that. Helene, are you still with me? I only have one, and she's here watching over me. And if I misstep, I will hear about it for the next week. At least I may not even get a meal. So this is Adamu, this is Saleh. You saw him before. These are all brothers, but they're not same father, same mother. They are same father, but they have different mothers. But they all get along really well. This background is a new school that we built. It's the third one that we built. I'll show you the first one in a minute. And this was just being built on our last trip, with money that came from here, came from New Mexico. None of this is my money, so I can't use the word I. I'm not allowed to use that pronoun. I don't even like we, but there was nobody else there but we and I. So I have to do that. So here's Saleh. So when you're out in the bush, 50 miles from the nearest town, then you live and you eat whatever they're eating. So the main staple of this area, they're cereals. People here live on cereals. So what are the major cereals of Africa? Well, one is what we call birdseed. It's Hart's Mountain. Did you ever look at the label on your birdseed? Everybody here in Zealand has a bird feeder. But if you go read the bag, and you'll see that it's millet. It's the cheapest of the grains, and it grows very close to and through the Sahara. And so it's the staple for these people, the Fulani. So this right here is my lunch. It's millet boiled up in water, and that's all. It's real simple. Now, it looks like wallpaper paste, and it tastes like wallpaper paste. You do not get a menu when you are in Africa. And so my main reason for going was to teach medical students, which I did every single day, every day. The first time I went, I had 240 students from the combat zone. So I had people who had fought each other a year or two before. I had amputees who were going to medical school. And they were sitting side by side. Some of them were even dating. So the war was healing up. And the university was a good place for people to get together from different sides. And so I did that. But then I also had a laboratory. And because I had big, strong sons, I was able to carry a lot of equipment. World War II instruments, which work really well in Africa. High tech doesn't work well there. It's too expensive to maintain. And so I would go to the Army Navy store and buy up equipment that I could use to measure things. Scientists like me, we observe and we measure. And so I could measure anything that I wanted to measure because I had built this portable lab. So my sons carried all the equipment, complained all the way. I want to be in Africa. I don't want to carry all this stuff, I'm not going to use it. So when I was not teaching then, I was studying the main diseases of the area. And they're not just nutritional. There's a lot of genetic disease. If you live in Squirrel Hill, you know that the Jews, because of the way they've lived for 2,000 years, sequestered, driven into ghettos or whatever, that there's been a lot of intermarriage. That is not a pejorative assessment of Jews. It's just what people did to survive. They got together. And likewise here, many of the tribes would stay together for centuries. And so they would inbreed a lot. And when you do that, you get a lot of genetic disease. It just comes with the territory. So I studied nutrition. I studied pregnant women. I studied their breast milk. I took blood from the cows, I took milk from the cows, which made the Fulani very happy. No American had ever come over and asked if they could study the cows, but we did. So these are some of the other conditions you'll find. Now this is one of the older slides. This was taken around 2000. Now what happened in America around 2000? Well, Georgie boy, everybody puts him down for not being the brightest president we ever had. And I'm not of his party, but he's my favorite president. My favorite president. Because what was happening here is there was an epidemic, had been for about 20 years, of HIV. We call it AIDS. And in Africa, AIDS is largely a female disease. Well, why would that be? Why would AIDS be a female disease? Well, as it turns out, in many parts of the world, power is in the hands of men. And the women are sort of second-class citizens. They do all the heavy lifting, they do a lot of the farming, and they have on average 8 children. 4 will die before they're 5 years old. It just happens. So this woman was diagnosed. She came into the hospital where I was working. I had a laboratory right in back here. And I would see the women coming in down the dirt path. And they would have a baby swaddled on their back, 6-month-old or whatever, like this one. Or they would be hand holding another one coming down to the hospital to get treated for HIV. There was no treatment for HIV. But then the discovery came. They found there were drugs, not necessarily immunological, but simple chemicals could be used to treat HIV. But they were expensive. Africa does not have a lot of money to spend on things like that. So George Bush was aware of all this. What he did was he created something. He created a program for Africa, which was called PEPFAR. I don't know if you've ever heard of PEPFAR.
Yes.
P-E-P-F-A-R. And if anybody in this group says, yeah, I can tell you what it stands for, I will embarrass you by asking you to stand up and tell us what PEPFAR stands for. George Bush was very often asked that question, and he always said, I don't know. But he put up $4.2 billion every year for 25 years. There have been 25 million lives saved. My laboratory was right next to the AIDS center. I saw it. The women stopped coming. The 90-pound wonders with their 2 children strapped to their bodies stopped coming. The women were getting fat, and the women were having children that were surviving. This was before PEPFAR. So I saw this woman, I met her, I interviewed her. She and her baby were dead within 3 months from HIV because the drugs had not come yet. And then, and if you ever hear about George Bush, you don't hear much good about him. And he doesn't blow his own trumpet. We all know what that means. We all read the Bible. And there's a place in there that says, don't sound your own trumpet. Do we know that? I don't know what place it is, but I've read it. It's in 11 places. It says, if you do good, if you give a gift, you give up control of it. If you do good, don't expect any thanks or any praise. That's the Christian ethic that we all know about. So George Bush has not run around the country looking for prizes, the Peace Prize or whatever. Some presidents go begging for these prizes. But anyway, so Bush did all this. And then 6 months ago, after 25 years of success, the United States pulled out of PEPFAR. $4 billion, look at $4 billion. 25 or 30 years ago, that was a lot of money. Nowadays, we're throwing $1 billion into a ballroom. You know how much good that could do in Africa? I can't tell you what it would do. It would do a lot of good things. So we don't have PEPFAR. I still am dumbfounded by that. I don't know. So, in addition to malnutrition and diseases like that, then they have congenital defects. Well, what's the difference between a congenital defect and a metabolic genetic defect? Well, One is caused by a single cause. We know what it is. In some cases, you can treat it. So for sickle cell disease, it's the molecule called hemoglobin. And there's one amino acid change in the hemoglobin molecule. Just one amino acid, and you get sickle cell disease. And if you're in Africa, you're not going to live beyond 15 years of age. In America, you live to be 50 if they take good care of you, right? So in my class of 240 students, when I went on that trip, I brought with me chemicals for doing the testing for what's called a trait. What's sickle cell trait? Well, sickle cell disease is one of the most basic genetic diseases where you have to have mommy and daddy carrying the defective gene. And if they get together, they will have a baby 1 out of 4 times that has sickle cell disease. It's an incredible number. 25% of the students I was teaching, I would look at them when I was in class. They didn't know what I was thinking. And I thought, 25% of you have the potential to have a child with sickle cell disease. And then I gave a lecture on sickle cell disease. And I told them that I was testing. I was doing a study on sickle cell disease and malnutrition, the two going together, compounding each other. So 2 diseases, one nutritional and one genetic, and they come together. And that's not a good condition. So very quickly, I would have my students coming down saying, Prof, I was always Prof. They would say, can you test me to tell me if I'm a carrier? And this is my girlfriend, and we would both like to be tested. And so I would do that. I could do 10 at a time. And so I would be able to tell them. They were very happy when one of them did not have trait. That's all it took. If one of them did not have that extra hemoglobin band on my apparatus, they felt they could get married and they would not have a child with sickle cell, which is good science, it's true. But sometimes each one got a hit. Each one had a carrier status for sickle cell, and it's a very bad disease to have anywhere, even in this country. But then there are congenital diseases where they're not caused by a single point mutation. So this little child, I was out in one of the villages, and I saw this child with her mother. Her mother was carrying her. She was 4 years old, believe it or not. She weighed 13 pounds. I weighed her. I got her blood. I studied her. She had never walked in her life, 4 years old. The mother had 8 children. 7 were girls. It's a bad thing to be if you're looking for a male to inherit the property. She had 1 son, and the husband was acting like most males do. Sorry, guys. Men focus on the male child. So what he did is he put all the money in the family into that child. And the girls took the hind quarter, as we say. So I saw her, and I talked to the mother, Halima, and I said, we can perhaps take a look at your child back at the hospital. I was teaching pediatricians, pediatric surgeons. I was teaching all kinds of doctors how to write. Do they need to learn how to write? There's all this disease around. The Africans are just like we are. If you're in an academic situation, what do you want to do? You want to do research. You want to write about what's called your people. So they wanted to study their own people. And so I had one of my friends in my writing class look at this child. And if you look carefully, she has a deformed mouth. So she had what was called cleft palate, hair lip. I don't like those terms. They're not very nice. So she had a double hit, and she could not nurse. She couldn't suck on her mother. And so she'd been held together till age 4 by some miracle on cow's milk. Well, cow's milk is great, but it should not be a replacement for breast milk. And so we put the 2 of them in the vehicle, the 4-wheel drive. We drove back to the hospital. I went to the pediatric ward, and my pediatric surgeon said to me, I think we can do something. The chances of her surviving, though, what I'm going to suggest, is only about 10%. So we talked to the mother, and the mother was agreeable, because she would have died within months if she didn't have something done. And she lived. She came through this. It cost my wife and me $240. You know, nowadays, you can't go to a good restaurant, get a bottle of wine for $12, and get in, you know, in and out for much less than $200. So anyway, it was the best $200 that we ever spent, because not only did she survive, she walks around, she walks and she talks, and she went to one of the schools that we built, which is the kind of thing that would bring tears, even to the eyes of a big, strong guy like me. I hate when he does that. Anyway, so let's move on. Oh, there he is again. He's everywhere. He's protean. And that is, as we say in Spanish, that's yo. That's me. And here's Dr. Vanderjacht. She is a professor also in New Mexico, and she wanted to go to Africa. And so she went along with me. She is a statistician, PhD. She can calculate, make graphs, and do all that kind of stuff that you see in the Wall Street Journal, you know, when you're looking at your investments and all that. And so she was in charge of all the numbers. I was in charge of all the writing. My wife would say to me, Helene, you can bear this out. If you walk through a village, you come out the other side with 5 projects, and you could write them all up while you're here. But she said, and you could also teach a rock to write. And I said, that is not a nice way to talk about these Nigerians. That smacks of racism. Anyway, so who's doing all the heavy lifting? You can see, even in the back row, that Prof is doing all the heavy lifting. So there are about 100 kids. It is very hot. This is Africa. It's very hot. And there's a big long line of kids coming through. This was a project done to assess the overall well-being of this particular village. And so Adamu is over here. He's the chief of this area, dear friend of mine. And this is Abdul Qadir. We first met him 15 or 20 years before that. My wife essentially adopted him with us. He was illiterate. He wasn't illiterate, that's a pejorative. He was pre-literate. He had never been to school. And so we sent him to school. And he got a high school diploma. And then he said, I like this education business. I like to go and become a veterinarian. And so we checked into it. How much would that cost? That's pocket change. So when you go to Africa, you become Santa Claus. Nothing is beyond your reach. And you just say, as the African will say, you Americans are always saying, I can do. That's their way of saying, you can do it. And so that's what we did. So Dr. Vanderjacht is, I'm being bossed around, I'll admit it. So I'm taking all the measurements and all that kind of thing, waiting for her to do all the manipulations in an air-conditioned room, all the statistics, and then I take over. So this is one of the projects we did. Here's another one. This is a village that we first worked in. It's called Toro. You would say in Spanish it would be the bull, El Toro, but Toro here is the village. It's only Fulani who live here. 300 blood relatives. All the men, all the senior men are brothers. And then the wives, of course, number as much as many as 4. So this was a very quiet place. I spent 3 years here every summer working on projects here. And then something very terrible happened. The village that's right over here, right off the screen here, that's about 3 kilometers away, is a Christian village. This village is Muslim. And they didn't get along well because one of the problems in Africa is land is limited, and you've got millions and millions of people competing for the use of that land. So my side, I hate to use that expression, were cattlemen, they were herdsmen. And their economy and their diets were all based on cows. And so they needed a lot of grass. This is savanna, but even the savanna has borders and limits. Well, this tribe over here were sedentary, farmers. In Boston, they say farmers. They were farmers. And so they had come butt to butt with the need for grass for cows, and we needed farmland to grow corn, what you call maize. And so one morning, the friends of mine over here woke up and they came and they attacked. There were no guns, no rifles, but they had machete, they had bow and arrow, and that kind of thing. And they destroyed Toro. They drove all the women. They didn't kill any women, they didn't rape any women, but if you were a male over 16, you were killed, you were murdered. So I lost a whole bunch of friends. By the way, this all happened on 9/11, 2001. So I got up in the morning, it was 8:20 in the Southwest. The towers had come down. They're blowing everything up. Well, I got an email from Abdul Qadir, the young man I mentioned, and he said they've destroyed Toro. Can you help us? I couldn't get a flight for 6 weeks, but I could collect money. So it was actually a double-edged whatever. It worked out well. And where did I go to get money? I went to the Christians and I went up on the hill. There is a Methodist church up there that is just delightful. I was never in a Methodist church. And there's a wonderful one up there. And I would go in there and they would give me $2,500, just like that. That's half a schoolhouse. Do you know how many sacks of corn that is? That'll feed a village of 300 for about 6 or 8 weeks, everybody. So the churches were really doing all this, and then I would go over there and I would get all this praise, and they would thank me and all that. And I had a hard time explaining that, no, there are a whole bunch of people behind this effort, but that didn't translate very well. So, when they destroy a village, then you know that it takes a village. Who said it takes a village? Hillary said it takes a village. Am I right? Yeah, Hillary did. And so we wanted to build a village. So this was bushland 6 months before, and each of these houses cost $1,100. So we built a dozen. The women who escaped from the burning village, they had to walk barefoot for 50 miles through mountains till they came down into this area where they were safe. And so those people got houses. They're duplexes. They're really nice duplexes, by the way. So there's a family here, there's a family here. And it works out beautifully. But if you build a village, you have to educate people so that when you walk away and you can never come back again because you get too old. You get too old. It was the hardest thing was to say goodbye. My wife and I had to say one day, we're old now. And you can't run fast enough or fight enough to get out of a bind. And so that was very difficult. So, but if you leave a schoolhouse, this first one cost $5,000 with money from on the hill, money from there, from put together with money from other places. Medical students. We're always complaining about doctors and medical students, bunch of egotistical little brats. Well, they gave me a lot of money. Even when I gave them a C grade, they'd still give, I didn't get as much as I got from the A students, but that's all right. So then we got another $7,000, so we built this school. So 1,000 children overnight, over the year, were suddenly going to school. There was no more illiteracy. And they're really smart. You can take people, you would call them herdsmen, they just chase cattle around the grasslands. But they're really smart. And they support the education of their children. And so we would have, in one building, we had a requirement. If we build a school, and of course we're all humble Americans, laid back, you know, we're not laying down issues of control. But the one thing we said was, if we build these schools, then you have to agree that half the students are going to be female and half are going to be male. They swallowed real hard and said, we want a schoolhouse. And so on one side here, you'd have 100 kids in one of these rooms. 100. And there'd be 50 on this side were women and young girls, and then there'd be boys on the other side. And they studied together, and it was really nice. Well, if you build a school, then there's one thing you have to have in Africa. That's clean water. The parasitic diseases are like wildfire. They're the big killers. If you don't have clean water, and you're getting your water out of a pond 2 miles away. When I came here, the women were walking with a jerry can or a 5-gallon open bucket. 2 miles, I measured it. So when I wrote a scientific paper, I would have data. That's what scientists do. They just get dilly-dilly over numbers. I can write another paper. I can make another graph. And so the pond where the cattle would go to drink, and you know, when cattle are standing in the water and they're drinking and drinking, they do what cattle do. They poop and they pee. And the water is the same water that the women put into the cans and the jerry cans, and they carry it 2 miles back. And that's where all the parasites are. So we said, there's one way to get around that problem. It just costs $11,000. And it's called a borehole. We would call it a well, or whatever. I made the mistake 2 years before this, seeing the problem of the pond, and I said, I've got $300, we're going to dig a 100-foot deep well. Seemed like a really smart idea. So we built it. And the cows meandered around in between all this, and the cows were still doing what cows do. So when it rained, all the runoff would run down into the well. So we had just replaced one unsatisfactory situation for another. It really happened. And then one day, one of my favorite little girls, walking at dusk, stepped in the well in the dry season and fell 100 feet, fractured her skull in 3 places. I happened to be in the village when it happened. We drove her back to town. They didn't expect her to live, and she lived. And it was really just amazing. So we said we have to drill wells. The company that drills them said, I think what you're doing is a good thing. I will do it for half price. That meant that we could drill 2 wells, which is what we did. So we built, this was the first one. And I went out to the village, and they were waiting. And they're not here right now, but they were all around the well, the mothers and all the women. Women are worried about these kinds of things. The men are sitting under a tree or doing whatever they do. But the women were watching the well. Oh, the other thing we did, I went to Merck, Sharp, and Dohme. Now it's called Merck. But in the old days, it was called Merck, Sharp, and Dohme. And I managed, to make a long story short, I got 5,000 doses of canine heartworm. But one pill works. One pill will clean out the intestines of a human being for 30 days. And longer, if they have pure, clean water to drink at the end of that. So it was a 2-prong attack. It was getting the medicine from Merck, and they were terrific about it. They didn't get publicity out of it. And then we had the well. And so the women were sitting around the well, and one of the young girls came out to pump the water, and all the women started crying. I didn't understand that. Because Africans, they don't like to cry in front of people. You could watch 2 men fight with clubs, and not one would wince. They could be bleeding. They could have a broken collarbone. They will not cry out. The women were all crying. And then I asked someone, why are they crying? Because they've never had water that they could see through. So my other friend was an MD who specialized in parasitic infections. It's just what I needed. So we came out and we collected poop, not on the cows, but on the people, about 2 weeks after the medicine was given. And he took it back to the lab, and I let him analyze the poop. I said, I write papers, I don't do poop. And so 95% of everybody we tested were completely clean of pathogens and the larger parasites, the worms and things like that. So it really worked, and it's worked to this day. The first pump we built, 20 years later, is still working. It was such a good idea, and when churches would see this, they would say, I'll buy into that. And so, what are some of these not social clubs, where people go, business people go, and they meet once a month and they have talk, what?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce is one, and then there are some others, but I would go there and talk about this, and they would take up a collection and give me $4,000, just like that. I could have run off with another woman, or who knows what could have happened when you give a man $4,000. But I was a good Christian. I could resist temptation. So long as it wasn't too tempting. Helene, I'm only joking. And that's a true story. I get all choked up when I think about it. Now there's Mrs. Glew. She's hiding out in the back. Helene, you have to wave your hand so they can all see you. Would you like to come down front here?
No, please.
So she's doing heavy lifting. You build a schoolhouse, and men are too stupid. You need teachers to make a schoolhouse function. And so what we did was, well, Helene on sabbatical when we were there, she would teach the teachers and then do some teaching with the students. But look at these people. They are absolutely gorgeous. Now, she's a woman, so she could work with the women. I could not get that close to a woman, no matter what age or whatever. I mean, it wouldn't even cross my mind. It's supposed to be funny. But anyway, I could work with the men. So we had a division of labor. She got all the pretty women to work with, and I got all the ugly males. So she would teach. One day I was out with the cows because I used to like, I did take breaks, but one of the big treats was to go trekking with the cattle. You could go 10 or 15 miles while the cattle grazed. They would eat grass and they would get water. And the Fulanis knew where all the water was and all the grass was. So I would go along with them with my notebook. I would write down everything I saw for the many journals that I write in my spare time. And so I was coming back to the schoolhouse where Helene was, and I heard all this singing. I didn't know what it was. It could have been Sunday church service or whatever. But if you're in Muslim country, it ain't Sunday church. It's Friday big mosque. But this was another thing. So I was listening, and Helene was teaching. You can't see the blackboard over there, but there's a big portable blackboard, and the alphabet is there.
They were singing the ABCs.
Can you sing a few bars for us, Helene?
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H.
Okay, that's enough.
Cut that.
But
Thank you.
that was very nice, dear.
They learned it.
So there are 105 little kids over here. And these are happy kids. They're not worried about grades. No, they're kindergarten. They didn't worry about those things. But they had Helene, and she was teaching them the alphabet. That's where literacy begins.
Look at the smiles.
By the time that we left at the end, there were students this age. That's the advantage of going back for 37 years. I got to see them go off into college. This was the first area that was sending Fulanis, herdsmen. Illiterate herdsmen were going to medical school.
Wow.
And so you have to be patient, but it can work. Now, where's the prof? Let's try to find him. There he is. At the head of the table. That's what white people do. They dominate. Now, I'm a very shy, I've said it several times. I'm a very shy guy. But one day, they came to me and they said, we're seeing all these papers that you're writing. They have our name on them, but we're the second author, or maybe the third author, but there's always a white person who's the first author. Now, if you know anything about universities, what matters most is who's the first author. The senior author, a graduate student, an undergraduate, or whatever. And every student that I sent to Africa, I sent 200, and I brought them all back. None of them lost a finger or a limb, which does happen in these programs. I would never do it again, knowing what's on the other end of this. So we were writing all these papers, and one of these men came to see me and he said, "You guys are writing all the papers and all this, and we're not writing them." And I said, "Well, I think your brain is the same size as my brain, whatever. So why don't you come to my workshop? I'll teach you how to write papers." It took a couple of years, but it worked. They were writing papers just as fast as I could. They were getting published in very good journals. Can you imagine Africans publishing in what they would call white journals? It happened. It happened all the time. It still happens now. So it's called a legacy. A legacy is when you don't have to be there, and someone who came behind you can benefit. We talk about legacy in our families. I'm sure you do all the time. It's a legacy. So I would work for 4 hours with these people for 2 weeks at a time. They would all produce a manuscript. I would give them a 200-page syllabus, which is a connect the dots, any idiot can write a paper type thing. And they were flying on their own. They didn't need me. I'm not an author on any of those papers. I don't believe in gratuitous, honorific authorship. If I didn't write it, my name's not going to be on it. And that's my last slide. So thank you for listening. Does anybody have a question? I hope I didn't offend anybody with my humor. Sometimes I overstep it. There's a yes.
Did you run into the idea that, I know in some African countries, I've been told by people who live there, that you can get rid of AIDS, a male can get rid of AIDS by having sex with a virgin. I know it exists in South Africa, and I think it's Ghana, and that there's very few virgins left. A lady who runs this rescue school over there told me personally that they were getting to the point of having sex with 18-month-olds, with the idea that that would get rid of their
AIDS. Let me answer it from the other direction. I can't comment on South Africa or whatever, but I had mentioned, I gave you a clue right at the beginning. I said AIDS in Africa is a female disease, and I left it. There's a reason for that, and it's different from the question you raised, which I'm not going to address. Don't have time. But, and I was at a university that had undergraduates, graduates, but they had medical students. But this is how it works. The men control all the money. They have all the power. And if you're a woman, you are really vulnerable. You could be the top student in your class. If you're a woman, when school lets out and you've had one meal all day, it could possibly be a porridge or whatever. There are a lot of women who are trying to go through school. And then in that town, you've got a lot of business people who have most of the money. So bankers, who has money? Bankers have money. CEOs and business executives have a lot of money. And there is money in these places. And so what I saw happen all the time was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the classes are getting over, this is true, the Mercedes would line up in front of the school, and they would invite the women out to dinner, and they would take them to a very nice restaurant. And so they were hungry. If you're married, you got 4 or 5 kids, and you may not be a school person, but the women, in order to survive and get food for their children, will do things that we would not find appropriate. So women are put in positions where they're compromised all the time. And so 70% of the HIV is in women, not by choice, but by environmental, sociologic sorts of things. So, if you go there, you don't suspend your own value system. You'd like to think that you can talk about other ways of doing things. But when people are starving, you saw people coming out of Niger. The alternative is sometimes to die. Or what's worse is to see your children die. Now we got, I'm not going to get political, but we got 13 million Sudanese who are living in the desert. They don't have housing or whatever. We have just cut back, almost eliminated, USAID. These are some of the most honest, highly efficient, accountable, I've seen them work. Dedicated workers, and now these diseases that we had under control, which were saving lives, improving the quality of life, I'm not going to get on a soapbox. I just did. And so it's very difficult to be a woman in Africa. Yes?
You showed a picture of the millet, and you said they cooked it in water, but they were also, the cattle and the goats, they had all the dairy. Don't they mix this millet with the dairy for more nutrition?
Yeah, sometimes your millet would be boiled with cow's milk. Yeah. And they do get a lot of other nutrients by fermenting their products that might not be in the cow's milk, but you put some milk fat from the cows, 4% fat, put it in the sun in a calabash for 7 days, and everything grows. You probably wouldn't eat it, but they know what they can eat and what they can't. And so the organisms that grow, I studied this, the organisms that grow can improve the quality of the diet. So they do get a lot of dairy products and that way, but they do drink milk, obviously. But that's a good question.
Does millet have,
Yes.
Does millet have protein?
Yeah, almost everything has protein, but it's a matter of two things, and you all know this. One is how much. You could have a great protein that's very, very nutritious, but you don't have very much. And if you look at all the ads on TV, you should be taking 25 grams of protein a day. Well, the African would laugh at that. We don't get 25 grams of protein in a week. So the second factor is what's called the quality of the protein. It's like people. There are low quality proteins and there are high quality proteins. So as it turns out, the highest quality protein that I could find at a reasonable price was rice. There's a lot of rice, but it's very expensive. So I could buy 2 sacks of millet for the price of 1 sack of rice. And I told the people I work with, I'd be happy to buy you all the rice you want. They said, no, we prefer millet. We've been eating it this way for 500, 1,000 years, I don't know. And we like it. So Americans are really good at wanting to fix things. I've got a better idea than you, and I'm going to change it right now. Well, there's something called mores. I'm not a sociologist, but there are belief systems which are very powerful. And very quickly on, very early on, you learn, just keep your mouth shut. You're not the smartest guy on the block. There's a lot going on here that you can't even see, let alone understand. So I could take a 4-wheel drive into a village with several $100s, and I could buy 1.5 tons of grain. That would last any grain you want. It would last for a long time. But I wasn't going to be there for the next batch or whatever. So what we did is we had programs, some of the students that I went with, who knew a lot about growing things, farming. fertilizer. So I switched. I started buying grain, and I started buying fertilizer. Fertilizer is expensive. NPK, N for nitrogen, P for phosphorus, K for potassium. We have a chemist here in the front row. I'm very intimidated. I wish I'd known that before I started. I would have been less careless. But when I drove up one day, not with grain, but with a truckload of fertilizer, I mean, they shut down the village. It was just a day to celebrate. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned early on that you was tenured. Was that University of Pittsburgh, or were you a professor?
I was tenured at the University of Pittsburgh.
As a professor?
Yes. And I will just say, I got tenure very early. I was very active politically. We had a medical school that had 136 students. Every day I went in the lecture hall, I saw 134 white faces. All the diversity of Pittsburgh was right there. I had Polish students, and I'll go down through the whole list. And I had 2 black students. And I thought, they're paying taxes. Last time I looked, the people on the Hill were paying taxes. And so I just couldn't shut my mouth. And so I would go on television, right down the street here, and I would say, we've got to change this. Dean, the true story, the dean called me in one day. He had 3 men in black suits. They looked like undertakers. Same thing, they were lawyers. And they said, Dr. Glew, you really can't keep doing that. If you go on television one more time, you'll lose your job. Say, you can't fire me. But it would cost a lot of money to keep my job. But I kept doing it until it just got to be very difficult. Don't get pay raises. Those sons that I talked to you about are like sons anyway. They want to go to college. So for several years, I never got a pay raise. Then they thought of a really good idea. What we're going to do is we're going to make him a full professor. I said, that's terrific. There was no paperwork signed. I'm not going to shut up. And I got to be a professor. And I kept going on television. I kept writing in the Post-Gazette. I love to write short stories and editorials because I was there. I was there. And so got to the point where I thought, let's try another challenge. Let's go somewhere where I've got 20% Navajo in my class, and I've got 55% Hispanic, 13 generation, and where I've got 25% white people. White people in New Mexico are a minority. It's the only ethnic minority state. White people don't like that. And so what you have is a situation where all the ethnic groups, everyone got along really well. One year I took 5 Navajo. Took 5 Navajo to Africa. That had never happened. And then I would go off to the reservation to recruit the next year's batch. And all the grandfathers would jump all over me. You're taking our kids to Africa. You're showing them things that will make them not want to come back to the res. And so I had difficulty there. Nothing was ever easy. Somebody always wanted to, I'm not complaining, but somebody always wanted to pick a fight or beat up on me. Except when I was in Africa. I got along fine with all those people. Yes?
What years are you talking about here?
Well, I started in, this is the 50th anniversary of our first trip. Helene had finished her master's degree at Pitt and a bachelor's degree at Pitt. She was raising kids until she was 40, and then she went to school. And so that was 50 years ago, or so. But this is the 50th anniversary of the first time I got on an airplane to fly out of America, land of the free, home of the brave.
I asked because I spent 2 years in East Africa
Which place?
with Peace Corps, Tanzania.
Who else is, someone else who's in the room?
Yeah, Mr. Brown.
Are you related to him?
No.
You can tell me. Maybe you're going to get coffee with him. I don't know.
But the things are similar, but by the time I was in East Africa, it had British colonization prior to Peace Corps going in under the first beginning of John Kennedy's.
Yes, Kennedy did the Peace Corps. Yeah. Well,
It was
good
a
for
great
you.
experience.
Good for you.
I've encouraged a lot of people to go, and my best friend growing up from northern New York actually ended up in Nigeria.
Really?
Yeah.
You should be up here.
No. I've forgotten too much of it now.
Come on, get up here.
I went as a nurse, so I was working there were 3 hospitals in the entire country of Tanzania at the time. And I went fresh out of college with a 4-year nursing degree. And I didn't know anything about all the tropical diseases and all that stuff. But
Did you get some?
not much, because we had a really excellent professor from Syracuse University who was a tropical medicine person who came to the Peace Corps training
Yeah.
and spent a lot of time with us on how to survive without coming home sick.
Well, that's nice. Thanks for,
So it was a really
Thanks for
interesting time. I would
telling us
recommend it
about
to
that.
any young person who can do it because it's a real broadening experience.
What's your name?
Ruth Shires, Shires.
well, thank you very much. Is there maybe one more question?
Just a comment. It was a blessing. He married a woman who chose your life's path together. Because you might have achieved what you did, but not as much as you did with your wife. I mean, it was just a wonderful partnership of wonderful experiences.
Colleen? Where are you?
She's right there. Have her come up.
Colleen, come on up here, please.
Please.
There's a very strong name. This is Helene Saint Laurent. You put your hands all over me. Any questions for Mrs. Glew?
Did you raise your children in Nigeria?
Yeah, we did. They went to school, to regular school. One of our sons had red hair and blue eyes. They had never seen that before. And so they were afraid of him. They were accepting. No, they did very well.
What are your children doing with their lives now?
What are your children? Do your children?
African things. One of our sons lives in Butler, and he works with children with developmental disabilities. And Ron
Is in Tanzania. Our son is going there, has spent 30 years there. Up at the foothills of Kilimanjaro with Maasai.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, it's been long enough, and he's had lots and lots of grant money, not tied to government, which makes it easier to spend.
Yes.
Doing development work, actually, as an anthropologist. So he builds a lot of things. But he's been going back and forth. But he's also he wrote a book about his work in the Peace Corps. That was in Niger at a time when you could go there.
Is the book in our library?
No, but I have a copy. I could loan you a copy.
That'd be interesting.
And I've written a whole bunch of memoir. If somebody wants, it's not published yet. I was writing scientific books. So you know, if you let me know, I could loan you one of those. Yes, Nancy.
What would one of those wells cost today?
One of,
The wells?
what would a well cost today? Oh,
I have,
there's
we
an
have
answer.
an organization called, we're from Ingomar, United Methodist Church, and Ingomar Living Waters has, we've raised over $3 million,
Wow.
but we actually, you know, you can do a well for $8,000 or $10,000. And if anybody's interested in donating to something that goes directly to water, that organization does it. And as soon as a well, like we sponsor, my husband, we sponsor a well every year. And as soon as that well is dug, we get pictures back. And you can do it for any amount of money. You know, some people will donate 1,000 and if, you know, 4,000 will go together and that well will be built and you'll hear about it. And there is no one paid through the whole organization. It's all volunteer work. And we've been doing this for 16 years, I think. So it's Ingomar Living Waters if you want to donate for a well. And it will go directly to a well, or like in Honduras, they have water, but it is bad. So we get filters for them. But there's a great book called A Hole in the Gospel by Richard Stearns, who talks about clean water in the world and how it makes such a difference. And our church read it together, and you're all convicted once you read that book of having to do clean water. So.
Well, that's interesting. One thing to keep in mind, I didn't talk about money a lot, is that any amount of money, $10 goes really far. I can't tell you what the amplification factor is, but it's really substantial. So you don't have to, you know, have a lot of money in the stock market or whatever, cash in a little bit of. Nowadays, you go to a restaurant, you're going to spend $100. You and your special date. It's, and people here think nothing of it. And at the same time, there's another world out there. And so, but it's a good thing. And it's easy to be cynical. Well, I've understood that when the money's handed from hand to hand, it's chopped. It's an African expression. It's chopped. You know, somebody takes their cut and then there's nothing left. That's not true. I can tell you, when I went over with $20,000, and the country, the police at the border said you can only bring in 5,000. I knew that, so I would, and you can't get anything bigger than a $100 bill. So if you get 20,000 bucks, that's a lot of paper money. I stuck it in places you can't imagine, and so I would put it in my shoes. I put it in my underwear, and it's difficult. That's why sometimes if there's an organization you can give to, if you don't have to take full credit for what happens at the other end with it, but you're contributing a piece, do that because they have mechanisms for introducing money into that system and doing it without draft. So there are a lot of reasons not to give anything.
Our church has it's a Memorial Park EPC church, and we have been part of a partnership with other churches for educations in Sierra Leone, and we have 12 schools there. We drilled the wells first and put in the trees, and then they built the schools and provided water for the children who couldn't come to school because they had to drink the water.
Yeah, comments about to what end you can use your money. Schools, water, universal. They're universal needs. So I think we should wrap it up, but I'll stand here for a little bit. But thank you very much for listening.